if you've seen the movie Ghost Ship, then you've seen this episode of Three Body Problem. This is season 1, episode 5, and my God. Definitely, I'm assuming the visual effects team, whatever their budget went to, a lot of it went to this episode. Because there's some crazy shit that happens in this episode. I didn't really fully understand what it was that they were doing, and then it just started happening, and I was like, what? 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 Anyway, click subscribe. I know I sound like a really bad version of Barry White right now, but click subscribe. So I guess let's talk about it. Yeah, so what I'm referring to with the ghost ship thing, you know, that movie that they made that was part of Dark Castle when we were trying to do the Dark Castle movies, was the whole, there was that cable that they had that like ripped through the ship, and like everybody who wasn't the little girl like got cut in half basically. And I kind of remember, you know, watching that scene, and then there's the guy who's like standing there with her, and I was just like, ugh. It's the only memorable thing about that movie. The rest of the movie is just meh. I like other Dark Castle movies. Ghost Ship is just whatever. But yeah, that one scene is memorable. They do that to this ship and all of its passengers. So Jonathan Pryce's ship that's been floating out, I guess to avoid anything because it's like in international waters, but it's been communicating with the aliens. Our humans devise some sort of invisible lasers that slice up the ship and all of the people on it, and they can't even see the lasers. They don't even know what's coming. And so people just sort of start like standing there, and they'll suddenly just get cut in half. Some of them in like weird positions, like a leg or at the torso, decapitated, depending on how a laser hits them. And it's obviously it's at a certain point. So as the ship moves forward, the ship is getting cut, and it's slowly getting to, so like people are trying to run away from what obviously is at one side of the ship, and no one survives this. Jonathan Pryce dies in this episode. And everybody just gets kind of like a gnarly death, and it's a pretty long segment, and I'm actually somewhat surprised that this was not the end of the episode. I'm surprised that they had this big of a set piece, and they had it sort of in the middle, and then they kept going. They were like, no, we have more story to tell, and I was like, kind of had like a jaw-dropping moment. They even have one of the characters there who's kind of reacting kind of like the audience, I'm sure is. It's just like, what is happening? Just kind of staring at the ship going, oh my God, what have we done? It's pretty crazy. And it's pretty, like, they kind of set it up. There's this guy that's looking for, and he finds this one, you know, ship guy, and he shows him his ID, and the guy is shook when he sees the ID, and he's like, I need you. I know, you know, I'm a civilian, but I've got this thing, and we have to work on this. And I don't know. I mean, there's some stuff that just because we can't see it, but we just see people's reactions to things. And so they assemble the best engineers in the world, and they have a little bit of time to put this thing together, and they catch this ship as it's passing by and just destroy it with technology that I didn't think we had. I just did not think we had it. Um, so yeah, that was a crazy scene, and we kept going, and eventually they go back into the video game and they talk to the alien race, and the alien race sort of explains what their plan is to destroy humanity, because they don't have the speed of travel. Like, the 400 years is correct, basically. Like, they're like, yeah, we really won't be there for 400 years. And as she picks up, as the main girl picks up, you know, they have had problems getting too far with their technology because of the way that their planet is set. They keep getting wiped out and having to rebuild, and wiped out and having to rebuild. So our technology will likely surpass theirs within the next 400 years. By the time they get here, we will be more technologically advanced, and we would be able to beat the aliens. This is what the aliens are admitting. But they have these two sort of like elements, like protons, that they've sent down to Earth that are gonna screw up science. And now I'm really intrigued, because I'm like, how do you destroy science? You're destroying our concept of science because you're saying that there's more in the world than what we know. I mean, I've always kind of thought of that. Like, I look at the periodic table of elements, and maybe this is like going to blow people's minds, but I'm like, okay, so those are the elements we found on Earth. And we do keep finding elements. Like, that's the whole thing about the periodic tables, that people just keep exploring, and then they find another one, and, you know, they add another one to the periodic table. It's not like we found all of those at once. They're kind of like rare Pokemon. But I've always thought it's entirely possible that if you went to another planet, that you would be like, oh, look, it's an element that we didn't know existed. Look at that. You know? I even thought about, like, the idea of, like, what constitutes life and how does something live. And it's like, well, that's how stuff lives on Earth. And we gauge life based on our needs of life. But what if life figured out a way how to develop on another planet, you know, not using our resources? You know, what if they didn't need water and oxygen, but they needed other things that that planet offered that we couldn't even conceive because we didn't really know what it was or what even existed on it? Anyway, just a whole bunch of things. It opens up that sort of like interesting conversation. But I love the fact that the aliens think that our scientists are so narrow-minded that when they're thrown a curveball, that they're just going to cave, and suddenly we won't be able to develop anything anymore because, well, shit, science is not what we thought it was. That's it. That's all it is. It's done. Science is dead. And it's just an interesting show that throws out a lot of questions. The whole worship of these aliens that are coming here and calling them our Lord, because, well, they're clearly not, because they're aliens from another planet. So it's just that cultish demeanor that Jonathan Pryce's group had before they all just got chopped up into little bits. Also, that scene in Resident Evil, the first movie, that was pretty gnarly. I remember that scene too. And I felt so bad for that dude at the end. I think we all did. Anybody who saw that film knows what I'm talking about, with the lasers. Because there was like one guy, and he was like doing so good. And you're like, man, this dude deserves to survive. And then finally you see those the final level of lasers, and you're like, there's no way. There's no way. It's impossible now. They've made it impossible. They're cheating. So, yeah, it's, this was an episode. Watch episode 5 if you haven't seen it. I'm sorry I spoiled it for you, but, why do you watch recaps of episodes if you don't want to be at least a little bit spoiled? Deep into the season. I can understand, like, the first, which is why I try to leave spoilers out of, like, pilot reviews, but I'm on episode 5. What did you think this was going to be? Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I'll give 3 Body Problem season 1, episode 5 an A, because it did kind of blow my mind. I I'm still shook. I'm still just like, what on earth? And I think I'll remember the scene for a while. I think this is going to be one of those scenes where I think of shows. I was talking the other day with a friend of mine about character deaths and how certain character deaths, when you say a show, and you just, like, your mind goes to immediately to one. And it's funny because I'm old enough that I just said, even though I watched a little bit of MASH growing up, but I said MASH, and she knew immediately what I was talking about. It was that death, you know? And I was like, yeah, there are certain deaths in certain shows when you just say, and you're like, oh yeah. Now, she hadn't seen LA Law, so she didn't get the elevator death, but there's certain deaths that are just iconic and scenes. And I think this is the iconic thing from Three Body Problem. I think this will be the thing that we talk about. I think this is Red Wedding. I think this has potential to do that. When people just say it, they'll just be like, I don't know what we've named this yet, what the internet has called this, but I think this scene has the potential to be like a Red Wedding, where people just reference the scene and they're like, oh yeah, wow, yeah, that one scene, oh my God, you know? Anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the other side.